Rise of Skywalker, not only the big finale of the sequel trilogy, but also of the overall Star Wars saga, the whole Skywalker saga as they call it. And J.J. Abrams kind of wanted to make a movie for the fans. So instead of tying up the loose ends of the overall saga and all that, he kind of just wanted to make it more of like, I guess a fan tribute rather than something that would logically be the ending to the Skywalker saga, that pays homage to like the prequels and all that stuff as well, instead of just the original trilogy and the sequels. So I mean, I guess like the biggest thing, all the stuff with Last Jedi, he was trying to build Snoke up to be like this kind of amazing character and all that, or like be like the big bad, the puppet master behind all this, kind of be kind of like this version of the Emperor. But with Last Jedi, Rian Johnson decided to kill off Snoke, which I actually thought was like a really good idea, because for the first movie, for Force Awakens, like I didn't really care for Snoke. Like at first I thought he was going to be this giant monster, dark side lord, and all that, but then we realized it's just a hologram. It's like, okay, it's all good. So the fact that they actually showed him in Last Jedi, kind of like this kind of Hugh Hefner style character with his golden robe and all that, and then Kylo actually killing off Snoke, kind of elevated Kylo Ren's character to make him seem like, oh, he's going to be the new supreme leader of the galaxy, which I thought would have been a really cool choice, where it really would have made it been brought down to Rey versus Kylo, like as these kind of two factions. Because in Last Jedi, unfortunately, Luke Skywalker dies at the very end of that one, which I have my thoughts on that, which I don't agree with, but I'll say that for another video. But yeah, so Luke Skywalker gets killed, and then Rey is now the last Jedi, and then with Snoke being killed, Kylo is the last kind of like dark side user. So now it really comes down to these two different entities going against each other. But then with Rise of Skywalker, the JJ wanted to have the big bad be Palpatine, since Snoke was killed off in the previous movie, and I guess he didn't want Kylo Ren to be kind of like the big bad, big supreme leader, so he kind of wanted to bring Palpatine back into the fold, which I thought could have been cool. Watching that first teaser and then hearing his laughter and all that at the very end of that, it's like, oh cool, they're bringing the Emperor back. I don't know how they're going to do that, but I think it'd be pretty cool. But then right off the bat with the opening crawl, it's like the dead speak, and then from that point it's just like, oh gosh, they're gonna revitalize Palpatine. And I know they have this whole thing with, I guess if you read the comic books, or if you read like the novels, or those kind of like guidebooks or whatever, it's like, oh, they use like dark side science, which Don Monahan's character, who I guess his name is Beaumont, but they never actually say his name, brings up that they use dark science to revitalize Palpatine, how he's a clone, and how after Palpatine died in Return of the Jedi, his spirit was transferred over to this kind of clone body and all that, and which, I mean, I guess it kind of works, but the fact that they have this whole kind of subplot of Palpatine continuing to clone himself in order to move this kind of like decrepit body, his spirit, into that one, and he had another clone of himself, which is like his son, and then his son got married, and then they had Rey, so now Rey is revealed to be the daughter of Palpatine, which I mean, I guess I guess I kind of go back and forth on, because I know in Force Awakens, everyone's just like, okay, who is Rey? That's the whole question throughout the whole trilogy. It's like, who is Rey? Is she a Kenobi? Is she a Skywalker? Is she a Palpatine? Which they don't answer in Force Awakens. And it's kind of implied, like, oh, maybe she's like Luke's daughter or something, which I thought would have been kind of cool, kind of go back to like the legends where, Luke meets up with like Mary Jade, and, they have their child and everything, and like, hey, maybe Rey can be Luke's daughter or something, that could be cool, but they decided not to do that. And then it gets revealed in Last Jedi that she's a nobody, which again I thought would have been cool, kind of give Ryan some more credit. Like I thought that'd been really cool, the fact that not every character needs to be tied in to a previous character or have some kind of like previous legacy or something. It would have been really cool if like she's just this brand new character, she's just Rey. But then they retcon that in Rise of Skywalker, where Kylo is talking to Rey later on and saying, yeah, I know I told you that that your parents were nobodies, but it was really because they chose to be nobodies, because we have this whole backstory of Palpatine try to make his son kind of like the next heir to the throne, transfer his spirit into him. But then, his son kind of rejects that and kind of, meets up with Rey's eventual mother. They have their child and everything. They're just trying to live their normal life. But then, they have this other character named Ochi. So then we have Rey's parents finding out about Ochi and then taking her to the planet of Jakku to drop her off and then flying out. But then they get intercepted by Ochi and they get killed by the little dagger that gets kind of like the MacGuffin that kind of gets used throughout the movie. But we'll get to that in a second. And, that kind of starts her whole backstory and stuff. And then the whole thing is like the whole search for Rey, trying to bring her to the dark side and, have her be kind of the heir to the throne and have Palpatine's spirit transferred into her. So that's kind of like the whole mission. In the beginning, the opening action scene where, Kylo, goes to the planet like Mustafar, finds the Wayfinders, they call it, to find the planet of Exegol, where he meets up with Palpatine, who kind of gives him this mission to find Rey, which at first he's like kill the girl and all this will be yours and all this stuff. But, his real mission is to kind of bring Rey to Exegol in order to transfer his spirit onto her. So yeah, I guess, everyone's like double crossing each other, betraying each other. There's all this like infighting within the First Order, with like Admiral Pride going after General Hux, who has this kind of like tension with Kylo Ren, who's the Supreme Leader. I thought he was actually really cool in General Hux was really cool in Force Awakens, kind of like this like young officer who's kind of like this kind of Tarkin type. And, people, I guess, underestimate him because he's so young, but, he really seemed like a force to be reckoned with. But then Last Jedi, Rian Johnson kind of makes him like an idiot who's always getting like your mama jokes and stuff by Poe Dameron, all this stuff. I guess they kind of continue that on to Rise of Skywalker, where he's kind of just like the lackey, always at the gets the short end of the stick, always like the butt of everyone's jokes. I'm just like, oh well, you kind of set him up in Force Awakens to be kind of this cool character, and then you kind of just like make him a punchline. But yeah, so yeah, that's kind of like the whole kind of inciting incident. And as the story goes on, Rey is training to be the next Jedi, is training with Princess Leia to be a Jedi and everything. And I guess that's another point, is that this movie was supposed to be about Princess Leia, but Carrie Fisher passed away, unfortunately, and she couldn't really be the main character anymore. So they kind of had to use like archival footage and make her kind of this kind of like supporting character. They brought in Billy D. Williams as Lando Calrissian to kind of bring in that kind of like legacy kind of supporting character. So then it kind of really just becomes about like the main three and Chewbacca and C-3PO and BB-8 kind of going on this mission to find the next Wayfinder in order to find the planet of Exegol in order to kill off Palpatine, because they hear this kind of announcement and everything that the dead speak of somehow Palpatine returned and all that. So that's their whole mission, to kind of go after him. So it's kind of like the whole road movie of like the characters going from planet to planet and going to like the desert of Pasana to find the dagger. And they find the dagger, but then they realize that on the inscription of the dagger is like kind of like Sith language, and C-3PO can't read that. Poe has that line. It's like, you can speak 50 million languages, but you can't speak this one. So they have to go to the planet of Kijimi in order to meet up with Babu Frick, who has to kind of like work on his like rewiring in order to read the Sith language. So he reads it, and they realize that it's actually on the Death Star, which is on the oceans of Endor. So they have to go to that planet, and they're like, okay, well, there's the wreckage of the Death Star, but like, where is it? And then, the whole kind of Goonie scene of like Rey holding up the dagger and then pulling out the little arm piece and then lines it up like directly with the ridges of the Death Star, and then the Wayfinder's there. So she goes there, steals a skimmer, kind of goes into the Death Star, which I'm just like, okay, but first of all, how do you know how to pilot a skimmer when you've lived on a desert planet your entire life? But anyway, she gets on to the Death Star, climbs up into like the wreckage, and then kind of goes into like the main throne room, which I thought, was pretty cool. Kind of like, and then you kind of hear like the Imperial theme that was played in Return of the Jedi, goes into that little side room, finds the Wayfinder, and then has her conversation with Kylo Ren, who's like been after her. He takes the Wayfinder, crushes it, and then they have their whole like last lightsaber duel. And then as they're dueling, they realize that Princess Leia passed away, and then they kind of get distracted. Rey stabs Kylo, and then he falls down to the ground. But then she ends up healing him, because now there's force healing in Star Wars, which kind of gets introduced back when they're in the caves of Pasana, where they have that little high-speed chase after the First Order stormtroopers find them. They fall into the quicksand after they get launch from their ships after the First Order speeders kind of shoot at them, fall into the sands, and then they get into the tunnel, meet up with this giant slug creature, and then Rey sees that there's like scratches on him, uses the Force to heal him, and then somehow the slug moves away, and then there's the exit that they need to get out. So, but anyway, Rey feels really guilty about Leia dying and everything, and then she takes Kylo Ren's ride, takes his TIE fighter with the Wayfinder in it, and then kind of goes off to Ahch-To, and she's feeling all like saddened about the fact that she lost Leia, and just doesn't really want to have anything to do with being a Jedi or being a Force. So sets the TIE fighter on fire. She finds a lightsaber, she's about to throw it into the fire. Force Ghost Luke catches it, and it's like, a Jedi's weapon deserves more respect, which is like a callback to Last Jedi, where Rey presents him with the lightsaber, and then he just takes it and throws it behind him. So a little retcon of that scene. So then she's obviously like inspired to save the day, because beforehand Kylo Ren revealed the truth halfway through the movie, that she's a Palpatine, and that they're a dyad on the Force, and that if they join with each other, they can like destroy Palpatine and like rule the galaxy and all that as Reylo. But she wants to have nothing to do with that. She feels guilty that she's a Palpatine. And then earlier on, when they're on Pasaana, when Chewbacca was captured by the First Order and taken off to the ship, Rey was trying to use the Force to bring down the ship. Kylo was also using the Force. So you have that kind of Force tug of war scene, and then Rey uses Force lightning and then destroys the ship, and she thinks she kills Chewie. So she thinks she's being pushed towards the dark side, being pushed towards her destiny of like joining with Palpatine. So she's obviously all upset about that. So Luke Skywalker, once they're on Ahch-To, trying to encourage her, yes, we knew that you were Palpatine this whole time, but Leia didn't really care about that. She saw your heart, and that that you were pure in spirit and all that. So she decided to train her and all that stuff, so that Rey feels inspired again. She just realized, oh, but I destroyed Kylo's ship, what do I do? And then Luke has like that line of like, you have everything you need, and then which was like call back to The Last Jedi. She goes into the destroyed TIE fighter and then finds the Wayfinder to go to Exegol. Luke has this whole epic scene of raising the X-Wing finally. That was a callback to Empire Strikes Back. She takes it, goes to Exegol, sends a signal to the rest of the Resistance, to like Poe and Finn, all the other crew, to like board their ships and then go to Exegol for like the final epic battle. So it's very much Return of the Jedi-esque, where Rey finally goes to Exegol and then confronts the Emperor, and then the Resistance, takes all their ships and everything, and then has the attack on the final order with all their Death Star laser equipped Star Destroyers, which they could be used at any time, but I guess it just took decades and decades to assemble all that technology and then put it under the ice of the planet and have that epic kind of rising up out of the ground that was established at the opening of the movie. But anyway, so yeah, they have the whole final battle, and when you think everything's good, Palpatine opens up the ceiling and then uses lightning to like destroy all the ships, and it's like tempting Rey. It's like, if you strike me down, then my spirit will transfer into you, and then you'll be you'll live on. And if you don't do that, then I'll kill all your friends. So she's about to like raise the lightsaber to kill him, and then just when all hope seems lost, we cut to Kylo Ren, who actually got onto the planet somehow. And I guess he called his boys, the Knights of Ren or whatever, to pick him up or what, but they never established how he got to the planet. So yeah, he gets to the planet and fights off the Knights of Ren, and then they have their whole Force connection, which is established in Last Jedi, and the whole kind of establishing that you can transfer objects with the Force somehow. So she's about to slay him, puts her hand behind her back, and then does a little magic trick like, oh, what's behind my back? Nothing. And then we cut to Kylo Ren with his lightsaber, and he's slaying all the Knights of Ren, who were pointless anyway, and meets up with Rey, who actually has another lightsaber, which was Leia's lightsaber. So then they reunite, they both draw their lightsabers, they're about to take on the Emperor, which would have been really epic, but obviously the Emperor uses his powers and then tries to like suck out their life force, and then realizes that they're a dyad in the Force, and then uses the strength of the bond to re-strengthen himself. So now he's back to like kind of prequel era Palpatine still with the messed up face, but now he has red robes and all that. So then the Rey and Kylo are knocked out. You know, it's like, as I fell, so too of all the last Skywalker. So he uses the Force on Kylo, gets knocked out, falls off the side, and then Rey's kind of like on the ground, like looking up at all the battle above her, and then, you know, she's saying like, be with me, be with me. She's calling out to the past Jedi, which she was trying to connect with at the beginning of the movie, so that she's trying to call out to them again. And, you know, I think of the How Should Have Ended video. It's like, well, if Force Ghosts can carry objects, why didn't Rey just like bring a bunch of lightsabers to the Force Ghosts and they can all take on Palpatine? But I know there's this whole thing of like, in China, they're very wary about like ghosts in films, so they didn't want to show any Force Ghosts, but they already showed Luke Skywalker's ghost, so what's the problem of showing more Force Ghosts of Jedi? But anyway, so she calls out to them, saying, be with me. And then she has like all the strength to carry on. You know, she stands up and has both lightsabers, and Palpatine's shooting the lightning at her, and she's saying, I'm all the Sith. And Rey's holding one lightsaber, and it's like, and I am all the Jedi. I guess trying to copy Avengers Endgame with like, I am inevitable, I am Iron Man. So gets her both lightsabers out. You know, the Force lightning's shot back on Palpatine because I guess he didn't learn his lesson from Revenge of the Sith about the fact that I guess lightsabers can deflect lightning and shoot it back at them, but you know, he keeps shooting it. I guess once it gets going, he can't stop, so he gets destroyed. The acolytes get destroyed, and then, you know, the battle is won. Rey's knocked out. The Resistance takes out the biggest ship. You know, Finn and Janna, you know, use their little grenades and toss it into the ship. The Death Star technology gets destroyed, and, you know, they get rescued by Lando. Comes at the last minute, another little Endgame reference where, you know, all hope seems lost. You think like the First Order's gonna win. You know, they're destroying all the X-wings, and then, you know, Poe's like, I'm sorry, I really thought we had a shot. There's just too few of us. And then, you know, Lando comes in and is like, on your left. No, he says, it's like, oh, there are more of us, Poe, there are more of us. And then has this whole armada, you know, going after them. And then it's like really much like Endgame with all the superheroes going after Thanos' army. Now it's all the people from around the galaxy gathering up to destroy the First Order and all that. So then all the battle is won. You know, Rey's kind of like left there limping. And then Kylo, you know, the Rise of Skywalker rises up from the crevice and then, you know, pulls her up. He transfers his life force energy to her. She wakes up, you know, they have their little kiss. All the Reylo fans are happy about that, and which I didn't really care for. So Ben dies, joins the Force, and then Rey reunites with all the heroes back on the Resistance planet, and then everything's happily ever after. And then until we get like the final scene where Rey goes back to the homestead, which I actually thought was a really cool sequence of like, you know, literally shot for shot of like, you know, A New Hope with like Luke Skywalker around the homestead. But then you get to the very end where, you know, she bears lightsabers, which I thought was fine. And then this random desert woman with the little space camel. It's like, there's been no one for so long. Who are you? I'm Rey. Rey who? Has a big dramatic moment looking off into the distance and seeing Forrest, Luke, and Leia. And then she has a smile and she's like, Rey Skywalker. And yeah, and we just ended from there. BB-8 rolls next to her. They look into the twin sunsets, and yeah, that's the end of the Skywalker saga. Yeah, it was definitely overall, it's just like a letdown. I mean, there's definitely a lot of factors going into it. You know, the fact that J.J. Abrams had his own vision of where he wanted the sequel trilogy to go at the end of Force Awakens, but then Rian Johnson came in and had like a sharp left turn and, you know, had all these changes and stuff, so he kind of had to work with that instead of taking the changes that Rian Johnson made and kind of going with that. He's like, no, I need to bring it back to the storylines that I had from Force Awakens and bring it back to like what I was trying to set up with my storyline. So I think that was definitely a detriment. You know, apparently he met up with Rian Johnson and, you know, Rian told him about all the changes he wanted, and I guess, you know, JJ really liked the fact that Kylo killed off Snoke, and, you know, it didn't really have to kind of echo the beats of the original trilogy and everything, but, you know, I guess he changed his mind at the last minute and, you know, had to bring the Emperor back in. And, you know, I mean, there are also, other circumstances of, like, you know, Carrie Fisher passing away, because I know she was supposed to be, like, the main character of Episode 9, but they couldn't do that, so, you know, they had to have, like, archival footage for her sprinkled in, and have it be more about the trio instead, and then maybe bring in Lando for a couple scenes, you know, C-3PO and Chewbacca and all these legacy characters and stuff, but they really kind of just did the best they could, trying to wrap things up and trying to make it as satisfying as possible. But, you know, in the end, you kind of have these two factions, people who, like, love Force Awakens, hate Last Jedi, and people who, like, love Last Jedi and hate Force Awakens, and you kind of upset both factions. So honestly, I gotta give JJ, as much credit as he can, just because, it was definitely going to be an impossible task either way. Just trying to wrap up not only like this movie, just make this a satisfying movie, but also wrap up the new trilogy and the overall Skywalker saga. But I mean, honestly, they kind of put themselves in this situation, Disney and JJ, just by not having a plan early on. Not only not having a plan early on, but also not using George Lucas's original notes for the sequel trilogy and everything. So they just gotta make that money. Gotta make good on their $4.5 billion investment, and crank out as many movies as possible. But hey, I mean, the movie made $1 billion. Force Awakens made $2 billion. So I mean, they got their money back, but yeah, that kind of brought an end to the Star Wars movies moving forward, at least until we get the Taika Waititi movie, whenever that decides to drop. But yeah, it's kind of a shame that this was kind of like the downer ending to this kind of Skywalker saga and this whole kind of like the Disney Star Wars movies and stuff like that. But yeah, well, hey, what can you do?